Melanie Traylor, and today we are kicking off the StashWork quilt-alongs. I feel like I've been talking about this for the whole last month, but just in case you're new here, we are following along all of 2024 with my book StashWork. There are 4 quilt patterns in this book, and we're going to make every one of them. We're going to kind of follow an every other-ish month schedule, and today we start with Checkie quilt. So it doesn't get more traditional than that. The whole purpose of this book is to get your stash under control when it's overflowing, right? So all of the patterns have been written to do just that. Quickly, efficiently, get it done. You will need a copy of the book to participate, but the quilt along part of it is free. So if you want to get yourself signed up, there's a link right below this video. Sign up and you will receive the emails, all the tips and tricks, all these videos right into your inbox, along with all the prize details. I should say that too. This week is sponsored by Arrow Sewing. They are giving away a cabinet unit. So stay tuned for those details at the end of the video. All right, so jumping in with Checkie quilt, our task this week is to choose and cut fabrics. That's it. So in these videos, I am going to go over a lot of things. We're going to talk about fabrics. We're going to talk about different looks you can achieve with the Checkie pattern. And I'm going to show you a few of the quilts that my testers made for me and how to get the different looks that they achieve. So we're also going to talk about preparing our fabrics and cutting our fabrics. So let's jump right in with that. All right, so you are looking at Instagram on a desktop. I don't normally get on Instagram on a desktop, but here we are. It's a good place for you to see a whole bunch of pictures at one time. And what I've done is I've pulled up the Checkie hashtag. And this is the hashtag that you would want to use, you know, if you're making Checkie quilt. All right, so let's get down to basics. Checkie quilt is a checkerboard quilt. That's what it is. So the thought behind this pattern, the intentions and everything, was to play with contrasting fabrics. I do not mean that you have to play with contrasting fabrics. That's totally up to you. There's no right or wrong here. So I'm going to show you some different looks that you could achieve by using the pictures that my testers uploaded to Instagram, but know that they're all beautiful. And it's just about what you want. There's no, like again, there's no right or wrong. You don't have to use a checkerboard, but you could if you wanted to. I just want to show you the different looks here. All right. Some of these are videos, so I'm not going to click on them. And some of them are photos, so I will. All right, but this one right here, this one is a high contrast quilt. You can see the checkerboard in this quilt. And you can see what she's done is she has mixed a bunch of different turquoise fabrics with her low volumes. All right, so that is the look. And what I want to show you here, and I wish I could zoom in. I might try zooming in on another photo. Let me show you mine here. Well, I wish I had a photo to show you. Let me try to zoom into this one. Oh yeah, I can do this. All right, what I want to show you about the blocks in Checkie quilt, and I know it's a little bit blurry because I've zoomed in, but right here, you can see where my cursor is. That's a block. That's what all the blocks look like. They're made up of 2 fabrics. This is the look that is detailed in the pattern of the quilt. You don't have to necessarily use a low volume in a color-filled fabric. You could use anything you want, but it's made up of two fabrics for each block. That's an option. I mean, that's how the pattern is written, but you definitely don't have to do that. All right, and I'm going to show you something. First, I want to show you that is how I made my quilts. With the 2 fabric blocks. So just like that. That's an option for you. You could also do something like Jessica did here. Instead of her blocks having 2 fabrics in them, they have 4. So another option, and what you get is a different kind of look to your checkerboard. She's still got a checkerboard look going on. She's just got it all broken up instead of those blocks put together. And it does create a little bit of a different look, and I feel like hers might be a little bit more scrappy looking and a little bit more fun. Another thing she's done differently is where I've used very subtle low volumes so that checkerboard look really comes through. She's used busier low volumes Different look, still great, right? So it has this scrappy funness to it, and I bet she was able to use a lot more fabrics than I did to finish her Checkie quilt. All right, this is Piper's quilt right here, and oh, so pretty. She's kind of done the same thing as me. She's used subtle low volumes, but she's used a lot more variety of colors. To me, hers has a woven looking feel to it. Like I can almost see the weave going in and out of it, even though, you know, it's not woven. It just kind of has that look to it. So just a variety, more variety of color difference from the one I made. This one here, this one is made by Jewel. This is the crib size, by the way. So Jewel has done the same thing I've done as far as two fabrics in each block, but instead of using subtle low volumes, she's used louder, busier low volumes, and the result is more, you know, more fun, more scrappy looking. These are cute Heather Ross fabrics, by the way. Aren't those pretty? Look at that little mouse. This is adorable. She's also used a more variety of colors, so that's a look that you might want to achieve. All right, Laura here. Laura, it seems to me, and I don't know this, but Laura seems to have said, I don't want to play with high contrast. I just want to use these fabrics. You kind of don't have the checkerboard look with that, but maybe you don't want the checkerboard look. So maybe you have a set of fabrics that you want to use, and that's the ones you use. And that, you know, looks great too. So lots of options for you here. Lots of things to think about. Let me see if I got any more. Here's another one, and I don't think you can really see. This is her Checkie quilt right here. You can't really see, but this is another one where let's not do checkerboard. Let's just put some fabrics together. So you can do that. So there's no right or wrong. Again, no right or wrong that you can do here. Just make it however you want to make it. Let's see. Let's see if I got anything else to show you here. So I guess what I'm trying to say is go ahead and decide what look you want. Do you want it to be checkerboard? Or do you want it to be a little bit more seamlessness? Do you want to stick with one drawer of your stash as far as color goes? Kind of like what mine looked at. Let me show you mine one more time. This is me sticking with my orange and brown drawer. Okay, this is me not diving into turquoises. So if maybe you want to do the same thing, or maybe you don't. These are the decisions that you would need to make. You need to decide how many colors you want to use, and do you want a checkerboard look, or do you want to just sew fabric together? Totally up to you. Do as you please. Do you. All right, let's move on. Okay, I want to give you a couple of schools of thought about those fabric charts and about ways to think about the fabric. So if you're looking at the fabric requirements chart within the Checkie pattern, what you're seeing is a choice to make. You can either choose to gather fat quarters, or you can choose to cut strips and count them as you go. All right. So let's say you want to go with fat quarters. It may tell you gather 10 fat quarters. It'll go on to fabric requirements where you cut that fat quarter up as many strips as you can get from it. That is the most efficient way to look at this cutting chart. Fabric requirements, the most efficient way to get this quilt made. That is going to be the least amount of time cutting, and like I said, way more efficient. I mean, you're gonna use up every bit of that fat quarter. That's your thing, right? What's going to happen though is that you're going to have a very small amount of number of fabrics, of differing fabrics on your quilt, and that's okay. That may be what you want. Another thing to think about is counting those strips. So instead of pulling out 10 fat quarters, let's say it told me that I need 20 strips. What I would do is I would just grab a whole bunch of fabrics. I would go through my stash and put together a color combination. I just pulled these. I didn't really coordinate these, although they're kind of cute. I'm just going to pull fabrics that I like. I'm not going to give any thought to how many fabrics I pulled, okay? And then what I would end up doing is cutting the fabric, 1 or 2 strips from each. Let's say I pulled 50 fabrics. I could cut 1 strip from each fabric. I could cut 2 strips, however many your pattern tells you that you need. This is going to take you more time to do, but you're also going to end up with a quilt with 50 fabrics instead of 10, you know? So just another decision to make. The thing that I like about this ladder, where you just choose fabrics that you want and you count your strips, the thing that I like about it is you end up in your stash sometimes with pieces that are this small. Sometimes you end up with pieces that are even smaller. So say that this was here. I could get a whole strip out of that. So that fabric would only get used in one strip, but you know, that would be okay. My point is that using this second method, it's going to use up those smaller pieces in your stash. That might be harder for the majority of quilt patterns to get used. So I don't know what kind of quilt patterns that you are usually working with, but a lot of mine will tell you to get 15 fat quarters. And if you have a piece like this that's less than a fat quarter, how does that get used, right? This pattern, Checkie, is perfect for these small pieces, all right? So either way you want to go, count your fat quarters or count your strips. However you want to do it, totally up to you. There's no right or wrong here. All right, one more thing I want to talk to you about choosing fabrics. I just grabbed a stack, so I don't know if all of these are on the width or all of these, or if these are fat quarters. I think they're a little bit more. But this fabric here, especially if you're a brand new quilter, fabric comes like this on the bolt. It looks like that. It's 42 inches once you unfold it. If I was to cut it right here on this manufacturer's fold, then I've got the width of a fat quarter. The pattern for Checkie needs fat quarter width fabrics. So you're looking at needing strips that are 22 inches long. So if I want to use this fabric in my quilt, I need to get rid of this half. So I would cut this in half, put the other half back in my stash, and just be using this piece with my finger to my finger. I hope that makes sense. One thing I want to touch on before we move on, grabbing a bunch of fabrics and cutting a strip or two from each of them is going to take you longer than using the fat quarter method. And just grabbing a fat quarter and cutting all of it. This is going to take you more than that method. So kind of keep that in mind when you choose which route you want to go on. All right, another little tidbit when choosing fabrics. Both of these sets are contrasting. They're just contrasting in different degrees. So in this one, I've got my very colored fabric paired with my very low volume fabric. That's going to make a really, really nice checkerboard that screams at you, all right? This is contrasting too, but they're two different shades of pink. So while I could also use those paired with a low volume, and I would still get a major checkerboard look to it, I don't have to. I could have my checkerboard be a little bit more subtle. Maybe you don't want that high contrast. Maybe you want subtleties. You could have a darker fabric and a lighter fabric, but not necessarily a white fabric. So still contrast, different degrees. All right, so here we are. Just a couple of things that I get questions about constantly. I am using steam in my iron, and I am using pressing spray. So this is a starch alternative spray. The reason I am so big onto pressing spray and making sure everything is crisp is because it makes your cuts more accurate and it makes your piecing more accurate. So I'm really, really into having pressing spray and preparing your fabrics up front. So some of my fabrics are just bits of fabric. They look like this, so not even a fat quarter. I'm going to spray them. Just a light spray, and then go ahead and iron them. And I'm going to do that for everything that I think I'm going to use in this quilt. If I don't end up using something, that's okay. I may try to use everything. I may try to, just use some of it. I can see the one thing that makes this counting strips a little bit more time consuming is I've got this huge stack of fabrics. I've got to press them all. I've got to cut them all, and I may need 2 from each fabric, but I may need 3 from some fabrics. So that's why it's kind of important to keep that running total as you go. And I might be doing a little bit of work that, that wouldn't be necessary. Some pieces I've got are really large. So this is what I'm going to do for every one of these fabrics that I think I'm going to use. I'm not gonna make you watch me press all these. And I'm going to get these done in my own time. I'll meet you back here when I'm ready to cut them. Okay, I've got everything pressed, and I should have probably said this before I started pressing my fabrics, but I'm gonna cut all my darks from one stack, and I'm gonna cut all my lights from the other stack. So if you wanna go ahead and separate yours out that way, that might be a good way to stay organized. Because when we get all of our strips cut and we take them to the sewing machine, we wanna have our stack of darks and we wanna have our stack of lights. And don't get caught up on the wording of light and dark. You may be doing dark and darker, okay? So your stack 1, stack 2, okay? So, because that way we're always pairing those two together instead of getting in the mix and not having the right things paired. So throwing that out there before we get into cutting. I'm not going to do a full-blown cutting demo. I'm gonna show you how to get started cutting, all right? So let me get set up for that. Okay, so I hope you can see this. What I like to do is I like to have the selvage right at me. So I'm gonna set these up, and I'm gonna have my selvage on one line, and I'm gonna have my edge of my fabric hanging over one of these vertical lines, just a smidgen, because I'm gonna cut that off and it be a fresh, perfect edge to work from. So I'm gonna line up a couple of these so I can cut them all at once. Definitely cut as many fabrics as you feel comfortable cutting. All right, so I've got my selvage sitting on this line, and I've got the edge of my fabric hanging over the vertical line that I'm going to cut from. And then I've got my ruler, and I'm gonna line it up to that vertical line. My eyes are not going to look at the edge of my ruler, all right? They're gonna look 1 inch in, and we're gonna line this 1 inch line of my ruler. We're gonna line it up with the line on my cutting mat. So just to reiterate that, here's the edge of my ruler, and underneath it, you can't see it, but there's a line on my cutting mat. This edge of my ruler is touching that line, but my eyeballs don't look there because I can't see that line. So I always line it up with the 1 inch line. Here's the 1 inch line on my ruler, and it is 1 inch away from the line I'm actually gonna cut on. Once those are lined up, I put some pressure on the ruler, cut about halfway, move my hand, more pressure, cut the other part. And then there is my clean edge, and I'm ready to cut. From that small piece of fabric I showed you, I was only able to get 1 strip per fabric. So the rest of it is gonna have to go into my scrap bin because it wasn't wide enough to use. And everything else, I'm going to count, and I'm gonna keep a total right there. So that's what I'm gonna do. And I'm gonna set these over to the side, and then I'm gonna grab more fabric. So I'm gonna do the same thing until I've got enough fabric. And what I'll probably do is I'll cut 2 strips from each of these bigger fabrics. I'll cut 2 strips, and if I still don't have enough, then I'll just go back and I'll cut more. So a little bit more time consuming this way, but it leaves you room to use those smaller pieces of fabric in these quilts. So I'm gonna finish my cutting, and I'm gonna show you what I've got. So I got everything cut. I ended up with a little bit of leftovers that can go back in my stash for the next quilt. That's okay. And I've got all of my strips cut. So this here is what we're doing. Dark and light. And I am going to be ready for week 2 when we start piecing these. And I just want to give you a kind of look at what this looks like. So every time I cut some, I wrote it down and added it up. Dark and light. So you might have something, that looks like that too. All right, and I just want to remind you that you see me counting my strips, using a gazillion fabrics. You don't have to do that. That's what's great about this pattern, is that you have so many options in front of you. Sometimes that makes things difficult, sometimes it makes things better. But these options make you able to use your stash a little bit better. And that was the whole purpose of this pattern, is to get smaller pieces in your stash used up. So you may be sitting here thinking, I'm just going to use 6 fat quarters, use every little bit of them. That's perfectly fine too. So do as you please and make this suit your needs and your preferences. Okay, remember, you have a whole week to do these tasks. So don't pressure yourself or stress yourself out trying to get it all done in one day. And even if you get a little bit behind, that's okay. All right, so I'd love to see your progress. If you post on social media, please use the hashtag StashWorkQAL. And you can also use the hashtag Checkie Quilt. And this is also where you can connect with other participants as well. All right, so prizes. All of those details, how to be eligible for the prizes, what you need to be doing, where you need to be clicking, is all in the week 1 email that you received as a participant. If you are not a participant, but you are signing up, the welcome email will have a link to every email that has already been sent out, so you won't miss anything. All right, thank you for watching this video. Have fun choosing and cutting your fabrics for Checkie Quilt. I will see you next week.